Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Another plug for you guys to join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU practices, inside intel that you will not find anywhere else. I can't say you're not going to find it anywhere else, but what I've got for you guys comes to our Locked On Cougars Insider Group members first. And the best part is it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. You're not having to go to a message board or having to log into a website to get the inside intel that you crave. It's $5 a month to be a part of the group, but the best part is the kicker, as I like to say, the 2 full weeks. You get halfway through fall camp without having to pay a single penny. Get all the updates coming directly to your phone. Join us today on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group and be a part of it. It should be a really, really fun season ahead, and hope that many more of you will be joining us in the coming days. All right. So I meant to mention this yesterday in my superlatives segment I did at the end of the show, catching up on some of the headlines around BYU sports while I was out on vacation last week. Well, I skipped over one, and it was actually one that kind of meant to mention because it's kind of a big deal. But BYU basketball last week announced the signing of Austrian international Aleksej Kostić. Came last week on the 23rd, if I recall, right before Pioneer Day. And I got to admit, when I saw this, I was sitting up on the beach at Bear Lake. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I mentioned this in a podcast, if you're an everydayer, that I actually told our insider group members, I think even before that, a while back, that BYU's final roster addition was going to be much like Mihailo Boskovic was last year. He's going to sign late in the summer, right ahead of BYU and getting enrolled in school. I remember Mihailo Boskovic, was that like a week before BYU began classes? He ultimately signed with BYU and enrolled and became a pretty critical cog, if you recall, from this past season. While Aleksej Kostić is not the same type of player as Mihailo Boskovic, simply because he's not 6'10" and has the ability to stretch the floor as a big man, what Aleksej Kostić brings is he's a 6'4" guard who's got pro-level experience and brings another steady body to handle the ball if BYU needs it. He is training currently with Austrian men's national team in preparation for their FIBA Men's World Cup 2027 qualifiers. Should be taking place in the Netherlands and Bulgaria coming up early next month. He has made his 7th appearance for the senior team earlier on this month, scoring 3 points in 17 minutes of action against Slovakia. And this past year, he played in the pro league over there in Austria for the Triskirchen Lions. Now, I probably butchered that pronunciation, but played in the Austrian Basketball Super League. And according to Eurobasket, he averaged 6.6 points per game while shooting 36.3% from three and 83.8% from the free throw line. I know that 36% sounds like it's low for a 3-point percentage, but remember, this is at the pro level that he's playing this. And at 83.8% from the free throw line, there's a correlation between high-level free throw shooters and obviously prolific 3-point shooters. He led Austria to a 4th place finish at the 2023 FIBA U18 Eurobasket. So he's got the credentials of what you like. He's 20 years old, so he's coming over as a little bit older of a player, but I think he's intent on coming to BYU, and much like Mihailo Boskovic, being a guy that maybe early on in the season, BYU throws it in some circumstances, and while it may look awkward at times, he tries to get himself on the same page with his teammates and the like. I think his pro-level experience will shine through in the end, and he could be a pretty steady hand for BYU on that guard line. I'm not saying that BYU's got a dearth of talent at that guard line, because guys like Robert Wright III, if you've been paying attention to some of the highlights coming out of BYU from their Instagram accounts and the like, Robert Wright is a walking bucket. And that dude, I know he's only 6'1" or whatever they list him at. That dude's going to be BYU star point guard. And there's a very good reason why Baylor was so upset when he left for BYU, and their eyes defected to BYU, but that's beside the point. This is a guy in Kostić, I think, comes to BYU with a point to prove. And I think a guy like Kevin Young, the selling point for Kostić is to point to Mihailo Boskovic last year, to point to the guys he's developed like Jaeger Demon, indie NBA prospects. He's pointing, obviously, to guys like AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders, saying, hey, you get to play off these two guys. Think of how many open shots you're going to have. You shot 36.3% at a pro level last year. And with those two guys setting you up, it's going to go up inevitably, even with a probably, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Eurobasket 3-point line is further out than the college basket 3-point, like the college game 3-point line. I like this pickup. I think it's absolutely something that BYU needs. It's a steady hand in circumstances where you find yourself in foul trouble and maybe your guards are having issues in a certain game. A guy like Kostic could come in and be that steady hand because he's got the experience of playing in high-level basketball matchups, and he's playing for the Austrian senior national team. I'm not saying that Austria is any world beater. They're not France. They're not Spain in terms of the world basketball pantheon outside of the Team USA. But this is a really, really savvy pickup. And yet again, shows that Kevin Young, he will mine talent out of anywhere in the world, and in particular in the European ranks. And I think history suggests what he did with Mihailo Boskovic a year ago indicates I think Aleksej Kostić should be a guy that comes to BYU with the full intention that at some point play a critical role. I will never forget that Trey Stewart and Mihailo Boskovic were essentially the key cogs. Remember, in that second half, they're out of Morgantown, West Virginia, struggling against the Mountaineers. They insert Boskovic and Trey Stewart into a game that felt like it was getting out of reach, and they energized a team that ended up. I think it wasn't that the first game of BYU's absolutely magical 9-game win streak to finish their regular season in Big 12 play. It's because guys like Mihailo Boskovic came in at a big moment. And Trey Stewart, I cannot ignore what Trey did. And Trey became a key cog down the stretch run of the season. But the same thing with Boskovic. It may be very well the same circumstance plays out this season for Aleksej Kostić. He's just a different type of player. Like I said, he's not a 6'10", 6'11" stretch big, but he's a 6'4" ball handler who has shown that he's got a very, very adept shooting ability. That should pay dividends for Kevin Young to have him on this roster. I love the way that Kevin Young has gone about building out his roster. I know that he's going to highlight A.J. DeBonce and Richie Saunders. They're going to be the two pillars around everything else that BYU does this year. Robert Wright III will play off of that. Guys like Kennard Davis Jr. are going to come in and hope to thrive in this environment. Keba Keita has got to be salivating at some of the looks he's going to get at the rim in terms of the lob threat that he already is just a freak athlete as BYU center. I've heard some really, really high praise for Kadeem. I'm going to butcher his name again. Kadeem Mboop. I think I got it right. But at 6'9", he is a guy that BYU thinks is just Mr. Versatile. Could guard 1 through 5, potential to play some 5 for BYU. I know it was mentioned that in the highlights the BYU put out from practice, if I recall, yesterday. Look like he was playing the 5 for BYU. And Boop was a guy that sat the bench the entire year last year after enrolling midseason because he had to finish some coursework at Utah Prep Academy. So I'm not trying to butter you up and make you think that, wow, this kid's going to be the end-all, be-all for BYU basketball. But it feels like Kevin Young may have found yet another diamond in the rough out there. And the fact that this kid comes in, speaking of Kostić, with pro-level experience, national team experience, you can put him in pressure-packed environments and situations in Big 12 play, and it's not going to be something that's wholly unfamiliar to him because guess what? He's playing in Eurobasket. He's playing in these games over in Europe that it's just kind of a soccer environment, enclosed, flares, heated up coins and batteries being flicked at you. Nothing's going to rattle him from crowds in the Big 12 conference. Yeah, they're intense. They're loud. They're absolutely on top of you. But, man, some of the environments that these guys play through in the European ranks, they pale in comparison in terms of just the physical, like, it's just, it's uncomparable in many respects. I know that American basketball crowds are loud, they're noisy, but there's not like a physical threat that seems to be looming over you that some of these European crowds seem to have. And I think the guy like Aleksej Kostić is a really, really savvy pickup for Kevin Young and the BYU basketball program. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Tomorrow on the show, it's the first day. We'll be out there. I think it's midday when BYU is going to be having us out there to watch practice. And then obviously we'll have interviews after that. Have a full recap for you on Thursday. But on tomorrow's show, my burning questions is BYU formally opens training camp in earnest with actual on-field workouts, practices, and the like. We'll answer those, give you my thoughts on burning questions as well as some bold predictions. I already gave you one. McKay Hillstead, I think he's going to be the guy for BYU, at least right now. We'll have more of those for you guys on tomorrow's edition of Locked On Cougars. So as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you for being an everydayer. And of course, come back tomorrow for more on all things BYU right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.